I was essentially homeless for like a week or two. Alcohol and drugs are my problem, but they were also the only solution that I had. Drinking every day, smoking weed every day quickly happened. School was much less of a priority. 3 semesters later, I lost my debate scholarship, moved back home to Wisconsin, really kind of tail between my legs, really lost a lot of my self-esteem, my sense of self, full of shame, fear, resentment.
Why do you care so much?
People have saved my life, and I am just trying to give back a fraction of what I've received.
Welcome to the Restored Podcast. I'm Joey Panarelli. If you come from a divorced or dysfunctional family, this show is for you. We mentor you through the pain and help you heal so you can avoid repeating your family's dysfunction and instead build strong, healthy relationships. What if your parents' divorce or the chaos that you grew up with didn't just hurt you emotionally, but actually wired you to seek relief through addiction? Then I might explain why you feel unsafe for no reason, why you keep numbing out when life gets hard, or why you crave control but end up stuck in the same self-destructive habits. In this episode, we explore the deep connection between addiction and family dysfunction, especially how growing up in a chaotic or broken home can make substances, screens, or even success feel like your only safe place. My guest is Scott Weeman. He began drinking at 15 years old, if you could believe that. By 21, he began spiraling, binge drinking, hiding vodka bottles, waking up in jail, and living a double life. Today, he's an author and founder of Catholic in Recovery, helping thousands find freedom from alcoholism, lust, and so much more. If you've ever wondered, is this just who I am, or will I always feel this stuck? This episode is for you. Now, in this episode, we do talk about God and faith, and if you don't believe in God, you're totally welcome here. Everyone knows that this is not a strictly religious podcast. Wherever you're at, I'm glad you're here. If you don't believe in God, just listen with an open mind. Even if you take out or skip the God parts, you're still going to get a lot from this episode. With that, here's our conversation. Scott, great to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Thanks, Joey. Thanks for having me.
If you would, take me to that moment when you hit rock bottom.
Yeah. I recall sitting on a cliff. Not like I was going to jump off the cliff, but there was a moment before I got sober in 2011. My girlfriend wanted no more to do with me. She broke up with me in August. My roommate wanted no more to do with me. He had changed the locks on the door, and, I was manipulating, deceiving, lying to most people in my life to try to manage consequences. And so I was essentially homeless for a couple, like a week or two, and was staying at someone's house who I was working with. But remember, I got a 6-pack of beer and walked over to the cliffs. He lived by Sunset Cliffs in Ocean Beach, San Diego. And sitting there with this 6-pack and thinking to myself that this is going to run out soon. And the only thing that I'm going to care about when this 6-pack runs out is that I want more. And I don't have the resources to get more. And I don't have a home to live in. And I have lost every single relationship that was important to me. And I don't think I'm going to ever find help. And I don't know how I'm going to enjoy life. I know that alcohol and drugs are my problem. But I also I couldn't say this at the time, but they were also the only solution that I had. They were the only way to effectively kind of relieve my mind from the insanity and the chaos and the darkness of the life that was created. Pursuit of alcohol and drugs was really at the heart of this. I mentioned my ex-girlfriend no longer wanted anything to do with me, which was fair. I mean, it's right for her. She was doing what she had to do for herself. And in many ways, that was the best thing that anyone ever did for me. I was, of course, committed to trying to win her back, telling her the right things, but not doing any of the right things. And there was this moment, it was on October 8th, 2011, when we had a very codependent relationship. I hadn't graduated college yet, but she was completing a master's degree in social work, and I was doing whatever I could to stay in her good graces. She asked if I would edit one of her papers. I was happy to oblige, and before I dove into that, I lit up a joint of marijuana and smoked it in my little studio apartment that I had borrowed money from my uncle to get into. And she swang by to say hello as she was going for a run while I was doing some editing. Hadn't even cracked open my laptop, but she had opened up the door, saw me, was almost eager to see me for a moment until she smelled the marijuana. And then from there, her face turned to this look of disgust. And she looked me in the eyes and said, "Scott, you are absolutely hopeless. You're never going to change." And she was saying exactly what I was feeling and thinking at the time. And, by the grace of God, the rebound happened 2 days later where I knew I needed help. And then on October 9th, I made my way to Mission Bay, pushed my bike through the heavy sand, a little beach cruiser bike, one of the few things I had left in my possession. Called a few close friends from back home, great friends from school, elementary, middle school, and high school, and then called my mom and my dad and told them what they already knew, which was that I needed help and that I had a problem with drinking. And the next day, October 10th, 2011, I walked into a 12-step recovery meeting, a bunch of people who had recovering from spiritual disease of alcoholism, and they had a solution to my problem.
Wow. What a story, man. So many questions, but the first one that comes to mind is like, what was driving all that? Like, give us a little bit of the backstory that led you to that rock bottom point.
I had a good childhood, other than the fact that my parents divorced when I was about 10 years old. And, the constant back and forth every week between mom's house and dad's house, which had very different rules and expectations at each, and step siblings at each as well. My parents got remarried about 2 years afterwards. Beyond that, my parents loved me. They did the best they could. Certainly growing up in Northeast Wisconsin, if you do a Google search of the 10 drunkest counties in the United States, you'll see exactly what part of the country I grew up in. It's like
interesting.
Outagamie County, Door County, Brown County, et cetera.
Okay, wow.
So alcohol was just a way that, that people locally, my family particularly, celebrated or dealt with challenging situations. I really refrained from drinking until I was a junior in high school, towards the end of my junior year, 17, it was like May of 2002. And a friend was back home from college. He went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and 2 years older than me, and invited me to go to a party with him. And I was eager to be ingratiated by these older kids who I thought were cool. And we walked to the party and had stuffed our cargo shorts with lukewarm beers. And I recall walking on the railroad tracks, lived in kind of a rural community in Wisconsin, 30 minutes south of Green Bay. And pulling out a lukewarm Bud Light, he said, "Scott, don't think so much about what this is going to taste like, because it's not going to taste great at first, but just think about how good it's going to make you feel." And I enjoyed the way that it made me feel. I didn't become an alcoholic after that first sip. I think there were certainly some circumstances and situations that were made it much more likely that I would be an alcoholic, some of that being familial, some of that being just kind of cultural. And I started drinking towards, kind of between my junior and senior year. It escalated a little bit into my senior year of high school. I do recall actually bringing a couple of times where a friend would bring like a Sprite bottle that was half drank and then filled with vodka in it. And maybe that would happen once or twice during my senior year in high school. But I was in sports, played baseball, was in policy debate, very active, very successful in policy debate, got a full tuition scholarship to a school in New York City, downtown Manhattan, Pace University. And that was a big change from small town Wisconsin to downtown Manhattan. And immediately, even on the orientation visit that took that summer before school started, kind of connected with people and found those social connections through drinking and drugs. And I don't know that maybe someone had some pot or something like that with them that time too. But once I got into school, it was on. I mean, a lot of my friends were a bit different from me, and just had, different kind of growing up experiences. My roommate was a transfer from Seton Hall University, and he immediately began to get into his fake ID selling business, and essentially sold fake IDs to most college students living in Manhattan. And so getting access to alcohol was not a problem. And, others who were opportunity to buy and sell drugs was made available, and, engaged in that. Drinking every day, smoking weed every day became, quickly happened. Was still active in debate. School was much less of a priority, but, I began really drinking or getting high every single day, multiple times a day. And it was really during that freshman year of college that, and I also felt this kind of escape. I was away from my family. I was away from trying to navigate and manage family relationships, particularly around my parents, different lifestyles and different households and things of that nature. And I thought that I had this newfound freedom. Unfortunately, I was just becoming a slave to the pursuit of feeling good. And I didn't, whatever made me feel good, alcohol, a variety of different drugs. The online poker boom was happening at the time. I was doing that quite a bit, and also certainly lustful pursuits as well. And I was really just losing myself, losing this sense of who I was. 3 semesters later, I lost my debate scholarship, moved back home to Wisconsin, really kind of tail between my legs. I had put a lot of really emphasis, really my identity in how people felt about me, and carried with pride this being voted most likely to succeed or most likely to become president, and I was failing. And I had a hard time, didn't know how to deal with that. I got 2 DUIs early on as well, I think when I was 19 and 20. After that second DUI, I went to treatment for 15 days at a treatment center in northwest Wisconsin. And that was largely kind of to get my parents off my back. I wasn't convinced that I was an alcoholic. I didn't even know that term. Like, talking to me about alcoholism was like talking to a fish about water. And it was just all around me. I didn't know anybody who was sober, certainly. And just thought I was also too young to be an addict or an alcoholic. I was comparing myself to other people who were my age, who were drinking like I was. Of course, they were able to go to school on Mondays or to work, and I just chased it, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and just couldn't deal with the reality today. Every day I told myself, tomorrow's going to be a different day. Tomorrow's going to be the day I do something new. Of course, tomorrow never came. And so things got progressively worse. After treatment, I stayed sober for about 8 months, really just white knuckling it though, not really any kind of spiritual alternative or program. I saw a therapist a couple of times. I went to a couple of AA meetings, but thought that it was dark and depressing, and it wasn't for me. And so then fell in love with a girl who was from a great Catholic family as well. And she was one of 5 kids. Family, her parents were just a model of what a Catholic family looks like. And this attracted me, of course, coming from a family full of uncertainty and divorce and all the challenges that involved. I, of course, wasn't willing to do anything that she was doing to get what she had, but I thought that if I just stuck close enough to her and her family, that maybe some spiritual osmosis would take place, and I'd catch what they had. And I'd say that the prayers of her family and her mom were very instrumental, and perhaps later one day, me getting sober and returning to our faith. Unfortunately, she and the family didn't get to bear any of that fruit, as that, most of the belligerent, dishonest, manipulative behavior she was a victim of. And so when I got sober, I really wanted to win her back. That didn't happen. Spoiler alert, but it at least drew me into the church and had me doing things that I maybe otherwise wouldn't have done if I didn't have these very human motivations. So that's kind of skipping around a little bit, but there's 9 years from starting to drink at 17 years old to when I got sober at 26 years old. Really lost a lot of my self-esteem, my sense of self, full of shame, fear, resentment. I was a victim. If I had published a book while I was active in my alcoholism, it probably would have been titled something like, If You Had My Life, You'd Be an Alcoholic Too. I was just full of resentment and also just as addicted to playing the victim as I was to any kind of substance or behavior.
What was attractive about playing the victim? Like, why was that something that you gravitated towards, especially having the success you had? Because you have to fight for those things too. So you had like the hero or the protagonist in you as well. But why did you gravitate towards the victim? Yeah,
well, I found that, for a long time, and I think this may be the oldest child of divorced parents, I felt that my achievement was my way into relationships. And so if I could show you that I was achieving things and worthy, I needed to kind of prove my worth. That inherent worth and dignity, I think, was somewhat lost. I think there certainly, I was learning from, my parents as well about, that maybe playing the victim would create some kind of pity from others. Now, I think though, really at the heart of it was being the victim was my way to rationalize my need for alcohol and drugs. And so I used that as kind of like this self-justification that allowed me to kind of maintain or perpetuate my own selfish and unhealthy behavior.
I appreciate your honesty there. I know everyone's wondering it. We don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but did you ever get to like make amends or reconcile at all with that past girlfriend or family?
I did. Yes. The 12 steps provides a really wonderful pathway toward healing and, internal healing first, and coming to form a relationship with God, as we refer to him in secular 12-step recovery groups, our higher power is God as we understood him. Of course, I came to know that God as being God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and got to know him through scripture and sacraments and my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who were helping really carry me during these moments of renewal. But yes, about a year after I got sober, perhaps just a touch over a year after I got sober, was finally at the 9th step where we make amends. In step 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed to become willing to make amends to them all. And in step 9, made direct amends to such people where, except when to do so would injure them or others. So I had really even, questioned, and with the help of an awesome sponsor, who had about 25 years of sobriety and recovery himself, walked, really looked at all of the amends that needed to be made. Kind of made some of the easier amends first and some of the more challenging amends after getting some experience. She was certainly on the challenging amends side. And there was a lot of preparation that went into this as well, recognizing that I was going to need to get honest and asking, how honest do I be? How much detail should I provide? What was advised to me was that I share in a general way, but be very open and willing to answer specifics if she asks. And we even went through the process of preparation. At first, writing a do not send letter. I did this for most of my amends. Like, what do I want to say to this person? Write it in a letter form first, even if I'm making amends face to face with them. And that way I could share that letter with my sponsor. And then he would take out a red pen or a red marker and cross out all the places where I was trying to either justify my bad behavior or blame others or, not take responsibility and rationalize and all that kind of stuff. And that was a really healthy process as well. We even role played what that would look like, getting really face to face, he playing her and me just kind of practicing. And so we were very thorough about this. And then when the day came where I made amends to her, I wasn't fully honest. And she had asked me a follow-up question asking if I had ever cheated on her. And the answer was clearly yes. And the answer that I spoke was no. And she kind of knew that was insincere. I, of course, knew it was insincere. She left that day feeling, probably worse than when she had come. I called my sponsor shortly after that as well, told her I know we had practiced this all, and I just couldn't bring myself to to be honest with her. And, I'm really motivated to win her back. And so I had to then call her, scheduled some time to see her the next morning to make amends for the amends that I had made. This was like the worst. I did not come through well in this situation. I did not, And she just made it clear, like, Scott, there's this voice that you have that where you start to rationalize, and I can't stand that voice. I am totally done hearing that voice. And, I came clean and told her that I had lied to her the day before and that, I'm committed to being honest. And I was devastated, totally devastated when I left there, but I had at least gotten honest. Called my sponsor to tell him, that I had completed that and what how it went, and it didn't go so well. And, I was kind of questioning the whole process of recovery. And he just very clearly said, Scott, I hear that you're hurting. And I want to just ask you a few questions. Do you believe in God? Yeah. Do you believe in a God that is all knowing, all loving, and all powerful? Yeah. So what are you worried about? God's going to take care of this and things will work out. Now, I had a really hard time seeing or even envisioning a happy life without this person who had really become my idol. As a result of pursuing alcohol, drugs, lust, other compulsive behaviors, I had lost a relationship with God, and it really empowered her to be my God, my idol. And that's an impossible burden to put on anyone. And wasn't long lasting. So, but I still had a deep relationship with Jesus through the church and had met some great people in the church and really wonderful people in recovery. And, was able to overcome that really kind of low moment in my recovery. Even though I was sober, I still felt like I wasn't really living up to what I was called to be.
So good. I appreciate that vulnerability. I think sometimes when people hear of the 12-step programs or being in recovery, there's a lot of misconceptions. I think one of them is probably that once you kind of make that decision, then everything gets better in your life. Mm-hmm. And it's refreshing to hear that, like, no, you still have like crappy days, or, you still have struggles, you have conversations that don't go like you want, like this one. And so I think that's refreshing to hear. I think another barrier I've heard from people I've walked with who've, struggling with addiction, saying things like this step of the process of like kind of making amends is probably the biggest barrier for them personally. And so you mentioned that, well, maybe talk about that a little bit. And I'm curious, like that last phrase you mentioned about how the situation where it would maybe cause injury.
Yeah.
Because
do so would injure them or others.
Except when doing so would injure them or others. So I think this is a huge barrier for a lot of people. Let's talk about this a little bit, and then that scenario when you make that decision. If you're from a divorced or broken family, the holidays can be so stressful and challenging. You know that. Pressure to choose between parents, being reminded of your family's brokenness, especially if you've been living out of the house or at school, and just feeling a bit lost and alone in navigating it all. Thankfully, you're not alone. Our free guide, 5 Tips to Navigate the Holidays in a Broken Family, offers really practical advice that you won't hear anywhere else, a worksheet to plan out your time with your parents, super helpful, and even a copy-paste template you can edit for communicating with your parents through messages or even a call. Most of all, the guide helps you feel less alone and more in control when the holidays hit. You can get the free guide at restoredministry.com/holidays or just click the link in the show notes.
Well, all of this is not done in isolation. I mean, I think one of the greatest gifts of 12-step recovery is having a sponsor who can walk us through the 12 steps and place our hands in the hands of God. I had some awesome sponsors and have awesome sponsors, and they've been very different and have provided what I needed in very different times. So he helped me to really discern how to go about doing all this, and trying to do all this by yourself is a fool's errand. It would be, because like I mentioned, we try to make amends and either don't do it at the right time, or don't do it with the thorough honesty that's required. It can do more harm than good. And so, what we did was we made a list of all the persons that I had harmed. And this was somewhat easier to do. It just, a few weeks prior, completed steps 4 and 5. In step 4, we make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And that's really an inventory of the resentments that we're holding, the fears that we have been guided by, and sexual conduct. And, the most important part of all that is not just the list of people toward whom we're resentful. Then in the 4th column, we recognize what's my part in either starting or maintaining this resentment. What have I done? And that's really the most important part to look at. So that can create almost the template for that amends list when we get into steps 8 and 9. And there were some amends that just weren't appropriate to make, old girlfriends and things, whereas to initiate like a conversation might also do more harm than good. There might be some self-motivation in that. And it's not just to relieve the monkey off of my back, but the intention is to restore and reconcile relationships. I think of it like the sacrament of confession, where we do a thorough preparation and then make the act of confessing, which in recovery is kind of like step 5, asking God to, remove whatever defects of character stand in the way of serving him and others, steps 6 and 7, and then doing a penance, as we would call in the church. In recovery, we would refer to that as an amends, but really taking ownership and responsibility for the actions that we've engaged in that have just hurt relationships or hurt other people. And also being honest with ourselves that if, is this for me or is this for the other person if I'm going to pursue to make amends with them? And I think some people don't get to that point because there is a lot of honesty that's necessary. It can be challenging, but it's also necessary so that I can look other people in the eye and look myself in the eye. And, just know that I have done what I needed to do to take responsibility and accountability for the things that I've done wrong.
Beautiful. Okay. No, it sounds like a deeply personal and kind of case by case discernment. And that's why going through a program, having a sponsor is so helpful to help you walk through. Also
really important not to use that as rationalization to not make the amends, So important to be consulting with another person throughout all this. The man who saved my life told me that working through the 12 steps is kind of like kung fu. It's like doing this on your own would be like teaching yourself kung fu. You might get some of the moves and such, but you're not going to get the essence of it. And, really need someone to be guiding you through it. I found that to be incredibly beneficial and fruitful.
Beautiful. You mentioned the man who saved your life. Who is that?
His name is Michael Todd. And he was at the meeting. So I mentioned, October 8th, I had this encounter with my ex-girlfriend. October 9th, I made the calls, tell people that I had a problem. Of course, drank myself to bed those 2 nights. That's just what I did. The next morning, October 10th, I came to this early morning 7 a.m. AA meeting held at an Episcopal church about 2 blocks from the beach in Pacific Beach, San Diego. And I recall I got there maybe 2 minutes before the meeting started. I was usually sleeping through hangovers at this time, working evening dinner shifts and such at a restaurant. And I heard, the meeting was taking place in the 2nd floor of an Episcopal church and kind of an open stairwell to get up to those stairs. And I could hear laughter and camaraderie above in the meeting. And I thought, I've got to be in the wrong place. If these people have any idea what I'm going through, there's no reason for anybody to be laughing. But hesitantly made my way up there, kind of sat in the back corner where I wouldn't be, seen or heard from. I shared during the course of that meeting. Afterwards, we got around in a circle, put our arms around each other's shoulders, and prayed the Lord's Prayer. One of the few prayers that I had remembered from my childhood, growing up nominally Catholic. And I didn't have, kind of felt like that prayer had this feeling of feeling like I was at home, like I had found my people. I didn't have a ton of time to sit with that and process that, as immediately afterwards a man darted across the room, looked me in the eye, and said, "I know exactly how you feel. You don't ever have to drink again." And he invited me to go get coffee with him. Not, "Hey, what's your schedule look like later this week or next weekend look like?" But like right now, let's go get coffee. This stranger who I just met, I said, "Yeah, let's go get coffee and talk about this." And so we did, and we sat at the coffee shop for about 2 hours and just shared with him what was going on in my life. And he said, "All right, well, let's do this again tomorrow. Meet me back at the meeting at 7 o'clock. We'll go at 7 a.m. We'll go to the meeting, and then we'll get coffee afterwards. And if you've got a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, bring that with you. Oh, and if you've got a Bible, bring that with you as well. And if you, feel the urge to drink between now and then, give me a call, and I'll be happy to help." And so we did that. We made that a routine every morning, 7 a.m. AA meeting, and then sat at the coffee shop for a couple hours. He kind of learned quickly that he had me held hostage because I had burned most bridges in my life. And, we would read through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and also, refer to different scripture verses in the Bible. One day he held up both the big book in one hand, the Bible in the other. He said, "This book, the Bible, is for people who don't want to go to hell. And this book, the big book, is for people who have been there and have no interest in ever going back." And that really, for me, opened the gateway to this life of faith and kind of got me into the church. Of course, some of that motivation was to win back my ex-girlfriend. But I was very blessed also that there was a local young adult community that was very active, meeting on Wednesday nights. We had dipped our toes the Lent prior, while I was still with my ex-girlfriend. So I had met a couple of people. I called the guy who was leading this, a guy named Brock, who's today one of my best friends. And because I had gotten his number, and I said, "Hey, Brock, I don't know if you remember me, but my name's Scott. I was at the Bible study during Lent. So you still leading that Bible study on Wednesday nights?" This was like Wednesday morning, day 3 of sobriety for me. And he said, "Yeah, come on by. We're here every Wednesday." So I made my way there. I felt like a total imposter and phony, full of shame, and assuming that all these people here have it all figured out. They're walking saints that have not made any mistakes. And, I was soon wrong about that. I was a little nervous about some social awkwardness, which in any kind of Catholic young adult group, you're going to have a little bit of that. Yeah, so I've, made my way to the church through this really active and great young adult community, then became an usher, volunteered to become an usher at the Sunday Mass, 9 a.m. Mass every Sunday. That was partly I was learning from recovery the value and importance of service and commitment. And I thought this would help me just to be accountable to getting to Mass every weekend, which was not a routine of mine ever in life. And so, I tried to apply what I was learning in 12-step recovery groups to my life in the church. And that was quite fruitful.
Beautiful. And again, thanks for sharing so vulnerably. I think for anyone listening right now who maybe is in that spot where they know they need help, but there's a lot of fears, there's a lot holding them back from, for example, reaching out to someone like you or your organization, getting in a meeting, a program. What are some of maybe those most common fears and therefore the mistakes that they make that keep them stuck longer?
Yeah, I would boil that down in general to, I think it's a fear of suffering. Father Jacques Philippe, in his book Interior Freedom, does a really great job of contrasting the difference between actual suffering and the fear of suffering, whereas he notes the actual suffering, it can be redemptive. It has, it can humble us. It can make us more reliant upon God and the people who are close to us. And however, fear of suffering, there are no redemptive qualities. It just puts us into a place where our options are often forgotten. We make very irrational decisions and really close ourselves up to God. And so I think a lot of that is just and this was my experience as well, fear of suffering. I had learned early on that behaviors and substances could keep me from suffering. They were also the source of my suffering, but for a little while they were also the solution to my fear of suffering. So drinking or getting high or using pornography and masturbation or gambling or even eating behaviors can be a way to kind of numb my feelings so that I don't feel those feelings. And I was running from feelings for several years. And alcohol and drugs were very effective at that. Of course, I would wake up with all sorts of feelings and then, kind of begin just the day. I mean, a typical day for me would look like wake up in the morning. This was before I lost my day job, but I would wake up in the morning and tell myself today's going to be a new day. I'm going to do something different today and, get up, get dressed, feel like crap, drive to work. And then by about 10 or noon, I would be caffeinated and hydrated enough where I would then in some way tell myself, maybe that was a little bit of an overreaction this morning. And I just, then I was just obsessed, the mental obsession. I couldn't wait to get that feeling, get that drink, that first drink of the day, because that would be my escape from all of the fears that were in my head, the anxiety, the depression, the negative thoughts that I had about myself and the world. I was, that was really the only solution that I had to relieve myself from the insanity that was going on in here. And so then I would, on my way home, stop at a liquor store, buy a bottle of Gatorade and a bottle of vodka, chug about half the Gatorade sitting in my car in the parking lot, pour a bunch of the vodka into the Gatorade bottle so that I would have a drink for my drive home, because I couldn't wait the 8 minutes that it took me to get home before having that first drink. That's how powerful it was and how attached I was to it, and it was my source of relief. Of course, it was a very bad source of relief. I needed to find more different sources. So I would just say that the person who is suffering today, if you're honest with yourself, if you allow yourself to be honest with yourself, which I struggled with, it was really hard for me to be honest with myself. My problems were everybody else's problems. My solution was found in alcohol and drugs and other compulsive behaviors and substances. But I also couldn't see how, I couldn't envision a different life. I was so afraid of the suffering that would come, the suffering that was taking place in my mind, that I was trying to escape from it every single day. And I just want to inform the person that is struggling today and is running from those obsessive thoughts, those maybe even those core negative beliefs that we think about ourselves and about the world and our relationship with God and others. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to us can end up being the best thing that could happen to us. And we're usually entering recovery on a losing streak. I've yet to find really one person who has started their recovery on a winning streak. But they just thought, well, I think today's going to be the right day to get sober. Usually it's by, experiencing the natural consequences of our actions. And, a lot of times in families and in other relationships, it can be hard for the person who is the quote unquote identified patient in the family to experience the natural consequences of their behaviors, because others, parents, spouse, kids, siblings, are kind of going in and softening that blow. And, so that therefore it's oftentimes family members who are most eager for this person to get sober, because they have experienced a lot of the consequences and have in fact kind of shielded others, shielded the person who is struggling from realizing the natural consequences of their behavior. So I think, it's a very nuanced and challenging thing, but oftentimes family members, if a listener has a parent or a spouse or a sibling or a child who is struggling with addiction, that's oftentimes the pathway toward help is you've experienced these consequences, but it's not yours. It's not your battle to fight. You need to learn how to take care of yourself so that the person who you love can be empowered to make positive changes in their lives with the help of God and others, maybe family members. But, sometimes there's a humility required to maybe recognize that the person who's going to help this loved one of mine is going to be some stranger, some anonymous stranger, like, Michael was to me and others have been to me as well.
So good. No, it's such a powerful lesson that it's a hard thing to just face yourself. That's what I hear you saying in the first part. It's like that alone takes an act of courage. It's a difficult thing to do. I remember when I was stuck just in lust and similar to you, pornography, masturbation, acting out in that way. It was, like you lie to other people, you deceive other people, but you lie to yourself and you deceive yourself, just like you said so well. And so, maybe that's like a great challenge. Like, just be honest to yourself, like tell the truth, even if it's ugly, even if it's something that's really difficult to do. I think that's a powerful lesson and a difficult one.
Yeah, there's a saying in 12-step recovery that we're as sick as our secrets. And so the kind of the raw honesty that we engage in a 12-step recovery meeting is, it's very inspiring to hear of really what's going on in other people's lives, and for them just to be honest about this, and really an outlet to find, once we share it, it's the burden of it is lightened. I was bottling everything in, from all of the ways that I felt about my parents' divorce to the, challenges that I was having in life. And of course, trying to present myself as though I've got it all together. But yeah, I was lying to myself just more than I was lying to anyone else. In fact, when I had pushed my bike through the heavy sand in Mission Bay and called my best friends and my parents about what was really going on, that wasn't even so much for them to hear it, but it was for me to say it. Like that was, there's so much power in that. And even in recovery meetings, as we're sharing stuff, it's kind of like, we're sharing it for others to hear, but it's also just really important for me to hear it. It's important for me to hear, my name is Scott and I'm an alcoholic. I have a friend, dear friend, who I met in the young adult community in San Diego a couple of years after I gotten sober. So he didn't see any of the wreckage, but he just knew me in recovery. And I remember a phone call we had at one time, and he asked me, he said, Scott, I know people who are alcoholics. I don't think you're one of them. Are you sure? Are you sure you're an alcoholic? And so, well, Dustin, you probably know, those people are probably active in their alcoholism. You've never seen me take a drink, but I'm very capable of it. And I really just kind of said, the only person that I need to convince that I'm an alcoholic is myself. As long as I am convinced that I'm an alcoholic, then we're going to be okay. I don't need to convince anyone else. I spent a lot of time convincing other people and myself that I wasn't one, and that didn't do me a whole lot of good. And so I think it's just important that we are honest with ourselves, with God, with other people. And it takes, we got to learn how to do that. I had to relearn how to be honest, of course, as evidenced by the failed attempt at making amends with my ex-girlfriend.
Wow, so good. I want to go to the situation you described where someone's trying to help someone else who's going through this, and they could see so clearly that they're struggling. But I think you hit on an important point. Like, how does someone know they're an alcoholic or an addict of some sort, whether it's with sex, gambling, other substances? Like, how do you and I hear the whole subjective part of it. That totally makes sense. But I'm curious if there's any like signs or symptoms that someone could use to maybe say like, I thought I just enjoyed drinking a lot, or I thought that this was normal behavior, but now I'm thinking maybe it's not.
I think something that everybody needs to come to on their own. And there are a variety of ways. I'll give you a clinical definition here in a moment. I'll also note that we have assessments on our website, catholicinrecovery.com, where if you're struggling with alcohol, drugs, lust, food, or a family member impacted by a loved one's addiction, we have some kind of questions and assessments that will help to, I'm going to say diagnose, but it's not really a diagnosis. It's just to assess, do I have a problem? Do I need to take a deeper look at this? For the most part, if someone is taking an assessment that, asking if they need help, they probably need help, or if alcohol is a problem. Normal drinkers or users of substances and behaviors aren't taking assessments about whether they have a problem. I have taken plenty in my life. So, but clinically, I would say that, oftentimes the traits of addiction, and I don't care really if you'd use the term addiction. Some people don't like that term. And I should also note, I was meaning to note this too. I say my name is, if I'm in a meeting, I'll say my name's Scott, I'm an alcoholic, or my name's Scott, I'm an addict and an alcoholic. It should be very clear. I do not define myself by my alcoholism or my addiction, but rather I define myself as a beloved son of God, and I find my identity in that. And that is at the foundation of everything in my life, as being a beloved son of God. And also, when I say my name's Scott, I'm an addict and an alcoholic, that can be a means. It's important for me to hear it because I need to hear it on a regular basis and not forget. I've got this built-in forgetter that can recall the euphoric memories, but can oftentimes forget the painful things that have happened. And my Michael, who saved my life, would say, that is a blessing. It's why women have more than one children or more than one child. That built-in forgetter, but also something that we need to be very mindful of just being honest. And it's helpful to be around people who are new to recovery to remember what it was like when I got here, not wanting to ever go back. So if there are consequences of our behaviors, and those might come in a variety of ways. They might be emotional consequences, this feeling of shame and guilt and lost esteem, anxiety, depression, jitters. Certainly spiritual consequences, trying to fill the God-shaped hole in our hearts with all things that are not of God. Familial consequences, relationship consequences, lost job or education consequences and such. Those things, if we're honest with ourselves, if we have a problem, we can usually point back to our alcoholism, drug addiction, food-related addictions, whether it's compulsive overeating or restricted eating, pornography, lust, and sexual addiction, whatever it might be. And then also that it takes this, this other component to it is this idea around tolerance, that it requires more of the same substance to achieve the same desired result. Or in a behavioral addiction, it would be kind of more extreme forms of that behavior in order to achieve the same result. We build a tolerance to it and need more in order to meet that. I would say also, if you're thinking about it, no, I really like Alcoholics Anonymous or other groups will really respect one's free will. If you walk into an AA meeting, they're not going to tell you, sit down, you're an alcoholic, you need to listen to this, and they're not going to try to convince you that you're an alcoholic. In fact, there's a lot of wisdom in this idea that, well, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, why don't you go out and try some controlled drinking for 30 days? And if you can control yourself and keep to the number of drinks that you're going to tell yourself to, and don't drink when you're going to tell yourself not to, then you may not be an alcoholic. But if that's a challenge and you can't keep to your limits or control your drinking, then come on back. We'll be here and we're here for you. It's noted in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that the obsession of every problem drinker is that he or she can both control their drinking or limit their drinking and enjoy their drinking. And for me, those two things were mutually exclusive. If I was controlling my drinking, I wasn't enjoying it. And if I was enjoying my drinking, I was not controlling it. And yeah, so, we got to come to that conclusion ourselves. If people in your lives are telling you that you might have a problem, they're probably not just saying that for any reason, but, people who we trust, who are a part of our lives, might be the ones to recognize that maybe there's a problem. Maybe this needs to be taken a look at. And, if you have a problem, you're probably going to react negatively to that and deny it. Of course, denial is a really big aspect. Denial, shame, isolation, fear, resentment. Those components are typically found in anyone struggling with any kind of either substance or behavior-related addiction.
This episode is sponsored by Blackstone Films. They just released a new documentary called Kenny. It's about an ordinary Denver priest who lived like a true father and transformed families and inspired vocations. He would actually wake up at 4:30 every day to do an hour of adoration. His parishioners would ask him to pray for them, and they actually got those prayers answered. Some even call them miracles. He had to shepherd his people through the Columbine shooting, if you guys remember that. Horrible, horrible event. He ate with the families in his parish every night of the week. He hiked with groups of young adults in the Rocky Mountains on Colorado, and he sat with couples on the brink of divorce, even saving a marriage, which they talk about in the documentary. And so if you want a hopeful model of leadership and fatherhood, something worth watching with maybe your spouse or your small group, watch Kenny. The trailer and the full film are now streaming on formed.org. You could just tap the link in the show notes to watch the full documentary or just the trailer. Again, thanks to Blackstone Films for sponsoring this episode and for telling such an inspiring story that I myself watched and really appreciate it. I think that just this whole lesson that it's hurting you and you might not even see it is just profound and important. And I heard the quote once that hurt people hurt themselves most. And I think there's like so much truth to that. So it's kind of, we need to see ourselves in this light of like, no, like you're sick. I'm sick. I need help. There's a problem. It's hurting me, to come to that point. And that's a humbling spot to be, but it makes so much sense that would be the path to freedom. And it's so, I'm sure it's so scary to even admit that itself, and then let alone reach out for help, and then go to like a meeting where you're showing your face and people might recognize you. And it's like all these fears that, come to the surface when you're trying to change the way you live. And I think one of the things I was going to mention too is I've heard it said that so many people just repeat the same 30 days or 6 months of their lives for their entire lifetime. And so, one of the invitations I would say to anyone listening, watching would be, do you want to try something new? And why might you want to try something new? You could always go back. It's always going to be waiting for you there. But why might you want to try something new?
I'll add a few things here. I think that the magic of what happens in recovery fellowships is, we have those which you just outlined, that fear and like, how am I ever going to come to actually talking about this thing that's been killing me, that I've been hiding from for so long. And the magic that I found in recovery is that, when we bring that stuff, and we expect it to be received as, judgmental or, shame. But instead of being met with judgment and shame, we're met with love and mercy. And people say, keep coming back. Like that for me was incredibly moving and motivating. And was very different from the way that I was expecting to be received. The man, Michael, would often say to me, similar vein to what you were just expressing, he said, I'm not okay, and you're not okay, and that's okay. And he said, actually, don't, if I ask you how you're doing, Scott, please do not tell me that you're doing fine. Please don't use that word when I'm asking you. He said, I've got too many people who one day have told me that they're fine, and the next day I found out that they had killed themselves. And so we just bring it to me like it's as it is. He said, out there in the world, we lead with our strengths. In here, we lead with our weaknesses. And in weakness, there is unity. And in unity, there is victory. And so, I mean, it was all counter to what I was just conditioned to do. In fact, early recovery, I just kind of also said, I'm just going to listen and do what these people tell me to do. That way, if it doesn't work out, I'll just blame them for it not working out. Now, in my case, it did work out, and I had nothing to blame anyone for, but that was also a little bit of a manifestation of that victim mentality that I had. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so following those directions of the people who are there. And he said also, never underestimate your ability to help the addict or alcoholic who still suffers. I found a lot of purpose and joy in that.
You did. Why do you care so much about this? You've dedicated your life. You've put so much work into helping people who were where you were. Why do you care so much?
People have saved my life, and I am just trying to give back a fraction of what I've received. And it also helps me stay sober and close to God. I mean, I think that the best gifts that we have in life can only be kept if we're willing to give them away. And so I know firsthand what it's like to suffer with an addiction, and the toll that it takes on individual lives and on families and on communities and even on our church. And so I have, just set out to help those people who have suffered and are suffering. I'm not the one to speak about prevention. That's like I'm the last person to be speaking about addiction prevention. But to those who have fallen in the well, I am eager to reach my hand down and help pull them up, as people have pulled me out of that dark well that I lived in for a long time. And it's incredible. I mean, the ability to see the light come on in other people's eyes, and to see them start to get honest with themselves and others, to see families return to form. That is an experience that I want more and more of every single day. And I get to witness God through the individuals and families who find freedom, who were in a place of desperation. So that I think is just a call Beautiful. That I've had. And this was not in my plan. I mean, I was supposed to be successful in college and be successful in debate, and then parlay that into some career in politics or law, or maybe be a sports agent or something like that. But I believe that God has given me the experience in that dark past, and not to shut the door on it, but to allow that to be an asset, probably the greatest asset I have, to stay committed and connected to God and to my brothers and sisters, and a great asset to share with other people who are still suffering.
Beautiful. I love it. One of the things you mentioned, unwanted sexual behavior, and how that's something you guys help people with, treat. One of the crazy stats, which I'm sure you've heard, is from Dr. Patrick Carnes, for everyone listening, who's an expert on sexual compulsion addiction. He found that 87% of people who struggle with a sexual addiction come from a broken family, what he calls a disengaged family, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Have you seen similar data, or anecdotally, that a lot of the people who end up struggling with addiction come from really dysfunctional or divorced families?
Yes. I question, though, at the same time, though, I know people who are, suffer from addiction who come from great families.
Right.
And none of us are immune from the potential effects and dangers of addictions. And I think that if we're honest, a lot of us experience all sorts of dysfunction within our families. Some of it, of course, much greater than others.
Right.
I think that for those, impacted by divorce, the separation of family is a great tragedy. I liken families to starting quarterbacks. This may not land for every listener, but they say if you've got two starting quarterbacks, do you even really have one? And I say, if you've got two families, do you even really have one? Because I think that the family unit is like my mom, whose parents did not get divorced, she has an intact family unit. My dad came from a family of dysfunction where his dad left him early on in life. And, a lot of tragedy has come from that. His sister died of a drug overdose and challenges with food and identity. And in a lot of ways, some of the same patterns have repeated themselves in my dad's life. So yeah, I think that certainly the traumas that we experience as children and the challenges, if we don't have something or someone that we have a secure attachment to and can find connection and a place of safety with, then it's going to be much more likely that we're going to turn to behaviors and substances to make us feel good. Because those primary caretakers who provide a secure relationship do provide also the outlet and model how we can self-soothe and without having to rely upon external behaviors or substances to help us feel better. And that, learning how to self-soothe in very healthy ways, either through exercise or prayer or surrender or honest conversations and such. I think that puts someone in a much greater position to be able to not fall prey to compulsive behaviors and substances that can be tempting as outlets of reprieve. For me, alcohol and drugs did for me what I could not do for myself. And of course, they also came with, they promised a lot and didn't come through on all those promises. And in fact, it turned out wanted to take everything from me. And so I needed to find a new solution that wasn't going to turn on me as alcohol and drugs and lust and other behaviors did.
Okay, real talk. If you've been trying to get in shape so you feel better physically and emotionally, but nothing is working, you're not crazy. I've been there myself. I recently read a free guide by Dakota Lane, a certified personal trainer who we've partnered with that's helped about 1,000 people, and it was really helpful for me personally. In the guide, he breaks down the biggest fitness mistakes that we all make, like undereating, overstressing, or focusing too much on the scale. And he gives really simple, practical tips that you could actually use, that you can implement today. And so if you're tired of feeling like you're never going to get in shape, just click on the link in the show notes and grab the guide today. It's totally free, and it might just be the thing you need to start feeling healthier physically and emotionally. No, that's good advice. And yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to see when you're maybe stuck in a compulsion, but there's so much in life that can give you like a natural high that can make you happy. In fact, there was a bunch of research they did at Harvard that basically said your happiness is more or less determined by the strength of your social connections, which is kind of a nerdy way to say like how good your relationships are. And the guy who did the research and wrote the book, The Happiness Advantage, Sean Acor, I think is his name. I might be butchering that, but he actually left Harvard and moved on the same street as his sister and his parents to just like practice what he was preaching. And there's some beauty in that. So I think, I think it always goes hand in hand when you're stuck in a life of deceit and addiction and compulsion, numbing, escape. You're so lonely, you're so isolated. And there's something beautiful that comes about when you're able to experience like a real, honest, good relationship and go out in nature and experience like, an adventure there, or travel somewhere and, not need to rely on substances and whatever other behavior. There's something really good and beautiful about that I think is totally being missed.
Absolutely. And, these things, these unnatural things that get us high, whether it's kind of like food, like compulsive eating behaviors, mostly around flour and sugar, or of course lust or alcohol, drugs, marijuana, legalized in many states throughout the United States now, has been long thought of as a non-addictive substance. I would argue with that for a long, long time, that there are very harmful effects and potential for addiction. But, using that as an example, like marijuana use on a regular basis kind of just discolors our lives. And especially when we're not under the influence. And a lot of these other things numb the natural experiences that we have, whether behavior or substance. And so even something like the enjoyment of a ripe fruit, can be just a gift from God, a pleasurable gift from God that experiences. But if we are inundating ourselves with these feel good drugs, lust behaviors, or whatever it might be, it can be very hard to almost appreciate those very subtle, pleasurable gifts from God, because our minds are so focused on this need. I need this substance or this behavior. It becomes my greatest need and source of comfort because I can't rely on God or other people to meet my needs. So I've got to turn to something else.
Totally. And no, I love that you mentioned that. It's just like how, yeah, like you said, a meal itself, like can be so good and beautiful and refreshing, and the taste is amazing. Like if you ever had, a good steak, it's like, wow, this is like amazing. This is so good. But you're right. Like those super stimulants like porn or, drinking, drugs really drain the life. It's kind of ironic. It drains the life out of those naturally good things and trains our brains to just seek those super stimulants. And I mean, what I'm hearing you say is like, you do need to go through a detox period in order to experience that joy again. Otherwise you can't, like they don't compare.
Yes, exactly. Hard to even see the miracles of God when we are so self-centered.
So good, man. A few final questions. I'm just curious if there's anything else you would add, especially given our audience, about how maybe your parents' divorce impacted you and contributed to your struggle with addiction. You've already talked about it a bit, but I'm just curious if there's anything you would add.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it was just this escape. I was seeking, I didn't trust God or other people to meet my needs. And so I sought an escape through alcohol, drugs, lust, gambling, food at times, internet and technology still at times. And so that's really at the crux of it. And that might manifest differently for different people, but I think a lot of it is often the same. I think really the thing that I wanted what I've been reflecting on quite a bit as a father and a husband, father of 3 kids, 7, 5, and 3 going on 4 years old, is and also coming to meet my wife. My wife comes from a great family. Parents are together. And, even as we were pursuing that relationship, I was sober a couple of years into my sobriety and active in my church life. And, even feeling a little bit of that shame of not, bringing a background of like a solid family. And, but just grateful that she was able to kind of receive that and love me for who I was at the time. But now I think sometimes too, raising our kids, we just kind of go back. Our experience is what we reference. And so, there's sometimes where I can get a little bit stuck still in resentment. And I'm so grateful for the 12 steps in our Catholic faith as just 2 ways, the parts of my life that help invite me into something new every day. But I can get all wrapped up in, what I'm trying to do is trying to give my kids an experience with family that I did not have. And I'm sure yours is the same, Joey, having the blessing of meeting you and your family. And like, sometimes that can be a challenge. It can be really hard. I can even get sometimes resentful that I wasn't given this, but I'm working really hard to give this to my kids, not in an envious kind of way, but just like I can go back to this victim mentality and also not referencing so I've got to just be very careful. And I'm so grateful though because our family and my kids are kind of fascinated. They're at this age now where they're very fascinated with my parents' divorce. They're asking questions and things. And even I've learned how to even communicate with my kids about the divorce. At first I was kind of like, well, why don't you go ask grandma, my mom, who was the one that instituted it or like initiated it and, kind of put it on the spot. This was not the right thing to say or do. They did not follow up and do that, by the way, but just I learned that it's probably important that I control the messaging with my kids around like what had actually happened. And my mom has gone through a lot of reconciliation and seeking forgiveness and has come to her faith in ways. And, a lot of my resentment toward her we've worked that out and very grateful for those opportunities. But sometimes they'll even ask we've got to say often, mom and dad will not get divorced. We don't believe in divorce. Even if we don't like each other, we're always going to be together. And because they're like, are you guys going to get divorced? Or, it just brings up conversations that I wish weren't a part of the family. But I also get it. They're kids and they're curious and it's outside of the norm, so they're asking questions about it. And I think I like to see it as really a gift that to be able to give my kids a family and that stability that they can rely and count on mom and dad being together no matter what. Yeah, even just being able to share kind of my recovery with them. They know the work that I do. They've even found a jar of my recovery tokens one day about maybe 8-10 months ago in my closet. Wow, Daddy's got treasure, all these, bronze tokens that commemorate different recovery milestones. And so even be able to introduce to them how I've come into relationship with God and know God through my recovery and what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. That's got to make that age appropriate, but still has been a huge gift to be able to just kind of reassure our kids that mom and dad will be together, and then invite them to participate in my recovery, which I have but a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. I'm not cured as an alcoholic or an addict, but get to live today in remission.
Before we close down, I just wanted to make sure to touch on this because we talked about it before. People who want to help someone who's struggling with an addiction, what are maybe the top one or two mistakes they make? And then what is the better, right way to help someone?
I would strongly encourage, just from an attitude standpoint, of perceiving or engaging with them as if they are a sick person, like they have a physical illness. They have a spiritual illness and have in many ways lost their capacity to say no, which does not mean that they're not accountable for their bad behavior or responsible for their actions, but the will to not drink or use drugs or eat compulsively or lust or gamble has been taken from them, or is no longer there in the way that their loved one has. And so just to treat them as you would a sick friend. I think one of the challenges that I mentioned, one of the things that people do wrong is they try to soften the blow of the consequences. And so, we'll try to, make that car payment so that the car is not repossessed, or make that mortgage payment because whatever might happen, or bail someone out of jail, or not, make sure that they don't get in trouble or cover up for them. Because honestly, we think of that, oh my gosh, that would be the worst thing that could happen to them. It may also be the best thing that could happen to them, is allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their behaviors and be empowered to do something different. What you can do, I think, is helpful, is to share from a place of humility, and maybe even recognize, like, I don't struggle with this problem, but I do struggle with this and this and this. And even just kind of providing some exposure, exposing yourself, and, kind of letting someone into what's really going on in your life can be helpful for them to get honest about what's really going on in their life. Because, they have been treated probably as the quote unquote identified patient in the family. And so everyone's almost identity has become rallied around helping that person. Or maybe if it's like a child, for instance, and, other children might be resentful at mom and dad because they're giving this identified patient more attention than they're getting. And, it's just a lot of messiness. The whole family is impacted. And so I would strongly encourage, if it's a family member, to also try to find recovery yourself. If a healed person who goes back into a wounded family system, it makes it very hard for that healed person to stay well, because in a lot of ways that family system is kind of set to have that identified patient. And when the identified patient gets well, other family members are not sure what to do because their identity has somewhat been formed on helping this person. And so that's, there's a lot of kind of deeper, I would say, subconscious psychology there, but sure. I've seen that play out so many times. There's, families want to maintain the sense of homeostasis, and it can be very hard to change within a wounded family system. And so if your loved one is struggling, find a group like Al-Anon or S-Anon or other groups. Catholic in Recovery has a variety of different meetings and resources for family members or loved ones, friends of an addict, alcoholic, food addict, you name it. And start recovery yourself. And this can be a pathway toward surrender and new life and trust and faith and all of the things that can be beautiful fruits of the 12 steps, and just surrendering and finding freedom through our Lord.
Good stuff, man. Appreciate that. And if people want to learn more about you and what you offer, maybe give us a little bit of a list of what you guys do offer. You mentioned a little bit, and how people can get that. Yeah.
CatholicInRecovery.com is our website. You find there all sorts of different resources, published several books. My first book, The 12 Steps in the Sacraments, A Catholic Journey Through Recovery, published by Ave Maria Press, is kind of the first book that I would encourage starting with. We've also published the Catholic in Recovery Workbook, which is a sacramental guide through the 12 steps, integrating wisdom from saints, scripture, catechism, and of course, taking one through the 12 steps. And then we most recently published the Recovery Rosary, which are meditations for those impacted by addiction, compulsions, and unhealthy attachments. We have a variety of resources free on our website, blog articles, and assessments that I mentioned before to help discern if this is a problem and what can be done about it. We have events taking place, monthly webinars, and virtual recovery summit that's going to be taking place on Friday, September 26th. Yeah, a variety of things. And then we have a digital resource platform called CIR Plus, where we walk through your first 90 days of recovery and have a host of videos, video modules, courses, resources, webinar recordings, a community forum to connect with others in recovery through the lens of Catholic faith, as well as daily reflections that reflect upon daily Mass readings, and another person who's doing Saint of the Day reflections as well. We just launched the Catholic in Recovery app, CIR app, so that those resources can also be accessed through your phone on a mobile app. Other retreats and events and things of that nature taking place. I've got a lot of good stuff going on. CatholicInRecovery.com. You can find more about that and either begin your recovery journey, or if you're in recovery already and active in a secular 12-step recovery group, we invite you to kind of integrate your faith into that, integrate Catholic faith into that process. We're not here to replace AA or SA or NA or OA or Al-Anon or all of the different 12-step groups that could go on and on. But really to be a supplement to those groups, and or to be a bridge between 12-step recovery and the Catholic Church.
Beautiful, man. Just want to give you the last word, man. What final advice, encouragement would you offer to everyone listening right now, especially someone who, is stuck in an addiction and feels hopeless?
I would say that the cost and the price of salvation is honesty. And we're promised a banquet with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And the cost to get there is for us to be honest with Him, with others, and most importantly with ourselves. And so whatever kind of humility might need to be found, and many of us in recovery find humility first through humiliation, but whatever it takes to get right-sized in order to surrender and admit that I can't do this on my own, I need help, would encourage you to find people who don't have any kind of affiliation to your family, your work, your maybe even church community, but who know exactly what you've gone through and have found a solution to be free from that addiction, compulsion, or unhealthy attachment, and freedom from those addictions, so that we are free to love, serve, and know God, our neighbors, and ourselves. And so I know, I totally get it. It seems like the worst thing that could ever possibly happen is for other people to know how much pain and how much challenge you're in. And the only way out of that pain and struggle and suffering and challenge that you're currently in, that enslavement, is by sharing with other people what's really going on. That seems incredibly scary, but I promise you that the fruits and the benefits from it will far outweigh the difficulty and the challenge and the humility, or maybe even humiliation, that can be found by just letting people know what's really going on. It doesn't have to be everyone. You don't need to take out a billboard to say that you are an addict and in need of help. But ask God in prayer how to go about doing this, and then find people who can be the eyes and the arms and the feet of our Lord. Just as Michael was to me, I'll say to you, you're not alone. I know exactly how you feel. You don't ever have to drink or use drugs or eat compulsively or lust or gamble. Again, God will make that happen, will allow you. But He also respects your free will. And when you're ready, He'll show up. He may show up before you're ready to.
That wraps up this episode. If this podcast has helped you, feel free to subscribe and rate or review the show. You'll avoid missing future episodes and help us reach more people. In closing, always remember, you are not doomed to repeat your family's dysfunction. You can break that cycle and build a better life, and we are here to help. And keep in mind the words of C.S. Lewis, who said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending.